welcome to the Leverhulme Doctoral Scholarship Centre for Horticulture and the webinar that we're presenting this evening to inform you about the centre. My name's Professor Bryony McDonough and I'm the Director of the Centre for Horticultures. So we're really pleased to welcome you here this evening. Thank you ever so much for joining us. We're hoping this is going to be an informative and hopefully enjoyable experience where you'll learn about the centre and also about the projects that are on offer with my colleagues who you'll see on the screen here now. So in terms of introductions, as I say, my name's Bryony. We're joined also by Deputy Director of the Centre, Stuart Mottram, who will wave at this moment to identify himself. We're joined also by the supervisors who are offering supervision on their projects this year, who will also be smiling and waving at this moment. Excellent, well done. We're joined also by two of our current PGR students, Fred and Blessing. You'll meet them a little bit later. They're here and they'll tell you about their projects that they're currently doing and also available to answer any sort of student-focused questions you might have. And finally, by Professor Dan Parsons, who's Director of the Energy and Environment Institute here at the University of Hull, who I will hand over to in just a second. So in terms of the kind of overview for what we're going to be doing today, I'll hand you over to Dan shortly to tell you a little bit about the Energy and Environment Institute. You're then going to see a short film that we've made about the Centre for Horticultures. You'll then pop back to me for a little bit of information about the centre. You'll meet the supervisors offering projects who will spend 2 or 3 minutes talking you through the project that's on offer with them this year. You'll then head over to Stuart, who's going to tell you a bit more about training opportunities and what it's like to be a PGR student within the centre. And finally, you'll meet Fred and Blessing, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions in a Q&A session towards the end of the hour. You don't need to wait till the end to ask questions, however. You can drop those in the questions tab available through the webinar software. So pop them in if they occur to you. If we then answer them as we're going along, that's fine, you're sorted. If not, we'll come back to them at the end and make sure we answer any questions they are. So hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to ask Dan to come on the mic now and tell you a little bit about the Energy and Environment Institute where the centre is hosted. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much, Bryony, and welcome everybody to the webinar this evening on the Horticulture Centre. And you'll, as Bryony says, you'll hear some amazing colleagues talking about some amazing projects. So I'm looking forward to listening in as well to what's in store for some folks and their future research. I just want to say a couple of quick things about the Energy and Environment Institute, which hosts the centre. The Energy and Environment Institute we formed just over 4 years ago, and the whole purpose is to bring together all the different disciplines across campus to address these big global challenges. And of course, water and horticultures is centered on one of those key challenges. So all of the expertise that exists right all the way across our university campus here in Hull is being brought together to really begin to question, ask those questions, address those questions, and seek solutions to these understanding water, the histories, the humanities, and the physical sciences, all coming together within the centre. So that's a really exciting prospect. So you'll join the Energy Environment Institute, but still have those connections and connectivities across campus into the disciplinary areas as well, and benefit from this transdisciplinary research environment that we're creating here at Hull. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the webinar. Welcome once again from myself, and I'll pass back to Bryony. I'll hang around and wait for if there are any questions, broader questions that need me to answer at the end. But I'm sure that the team will have answers to all and the many questions that you'll have towards the end. So thanks again, Bryony, and yeah, I'm looking forward to listening in.
The University of Hull Leverhulme Doctoral Scholarship Centre for Horticulture is a new interdisciplinary research centre hosted in the university's Energy and Environment Institute. We'll be hosting doctoral scholars from all over the world working on projects that explore humanities' relationship with water, past, present and future. Doctoral scholars will benefit from a dedicated placement scheme with opportunities to undertake placements of 1 to 3 months across a range of national and international water, heritage and creative industry partners.
The Green-Blue Humanities is a highly original and significant new interdisciplinary research area at the University of Hull that will interrogate cultural responses to and understandings of water in coastal, estuarine and delta regions globally.
We will deliver cutting-edge, humanities-led, comparative and trans-historical approaches to living with water.
So why is this research needed? Well, today, human-induced climate change is increasing both the likelihood and the severity of floods and droughts. Coastal, estuarine and delta populations in the world's green-blue regions are particularly vulnerable in an uncertain future climate.
These are populous yet precarious zones, home to some of the world's largest cities and busiest seaports, yet increasingly prone to extraordinary flooding and unpredictable change. People and societies must learn to live with water.
We need to learn from the past, from multiple disciplines, and from Western, non-Western, and Indigenous water cultures.
Engaging diverse communities and building resilience to water stresses and shocks are urgent societal challenges, with the most vulnerable often the least well informed about exposure and mitigation. The Centre for Horticulture is an interdisciplinary research centre. Doctoral scholars will benefit from access to the EEI's facilities and research environment and from world-class expertise in water-related research in the arts, humanities, social, physical and health sciences.
The Centre for Horticulture offers an unrivaled doctoral training scheme designed to promote open-minded and outward-facing researchers.
By working with our doctoral scholars to pioneer a new interdisciplinary area, the Centre for Horticulture offers scholars a unique opportunity to shape research agendas and develop research solutions that will sustain our cities, communities and cultures of the green-blue regions of the world for generations to come.
Brilliant. So hopefully that was useful to you. I survived listening to myself talk for 2 or 3 minutes, which is a hideous experience. I'm sure we would all agree, but hopefully you've learned a great deal. So the Centre for Horticulture, as we said, is a new interdisciplinary research centre. It will interrogate cultural responses to and understandings of water in coastal, estuarine and delta regions globally. As we said in the film, will deliver cutting-edge, humanities-led, comparative and trans-historical approaches to learning and living with water. We'll be learning from the past, from cultures worldwide, and from conversations with the sciences in order to rethink fundamentally what we know about cultures of water, past, present, and future. So the centre is designed to develop, train and support a new generation of research leaders to work together across the humanities, arts, social sciences and health and physical sciences. And we're doing that for 3 key reasons. So firstly, to better understand water cultures in their diverse temporal and geographical contexts. Secondly, to find solutions to and engage diverse communities worldwide in the complex challenges of living with water in a changing climate. This is an urgent societal challenge, and one that projects in the arts and humanities are uniquely placed to support. Thirdly, we're working together to pioneer a new interdisciplinary area, the green-blue humanities, and to equip a new generation of doctoral researchers to take this agenda forwards. So the Centre focuses capacity and innovation on the critical green-blue interface at the land's edge. It does so in order to address three cross-cutting water challenges that have shaped lives and livelihoods across time and space. So these are flood and water-based disasters, water scarcity, including drought and water supply issues, and finally, unsafe water, including concerns about sanitation, disease, and pollution. Now, the University of Hull is uniquely positioned to develop the green-blue humanities through the work of Horticultures. No other UK university offers Hull's combination of an international reputation in water research, significant expertise and experience in community engagement and cultural sector evaluation, and that was gained in the period that Hull was the UK City of Culture and the university was the City of Culture's principal research partner. It also stems from existing supervisory strengths in the arts and humanities, along with a rich maritime history and long experience of living with complex water challenges. So CWC, the Centre for Horticultures, is supported by an interdisciplinary research team. I'm a historical geographer and environmental historian by training. The deputy directors, Dr. Stuart Mottram, who you've met, and Professor Tom Coulthard, are an English scholar and a physical geographer by training. The theme leads work in Indigenous history, in histories of slavery, and in education. And the supervisory teams, including those of my colleagues here today, draw on a range of disciplinary approaches from English to history, geography to education, drama to environmental sciences and marine sciences, and health sciences to politics. We've had 8 new PGRs join us in the centre in September 21, including Blessing and Fred. And this year, we're advertising 5 interdisciplinary projects exploring global watercultures through time and across space. These are to start in September 2022. So that's it in terms of a little bit of background on the centre and our aims and ambitions. I'm now going to hand over to our fabulous project supervisors, starting with Elsbeth, who are going to introduce themselves and their projects. Elsbeth.
Good evening, everybody. It's delightful to be on this webinar with you all and to have the opportunity to tell you about the different projects that we're offering for PhD students. So my name's Dr. Elsbeth Robinson. I'm a human geographer here at the University of Hull in the Department of Geography, Geology and Environment. And have the next slide, please. So the project that I'm going to be leading on is called Gendered Survival, Women and Water Crises in Southern Africa. And it really goes to the heart of those 3 themes that Brian has just outlined. So we know that Southern Africa is one of the world's poorest developing regions. It's a climate change hotspot. We see recurring crises linked to water, especially flooding, cyclones and droughts. So even though there's been really decades of efforts to try and develop and improve things in the Southern African region, still about 40% of the population there lack access to safe water. And that includes communities along the 9,500 kilometres of the coastline of South Africa bordering the South Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. And that's going to be the regional focus for this PhD project. So a lot of people in this region, what we might call a green-blue coastal zone, live very precarious lives in relation to water-related shocks and stress, And things like the Cape Town Day Zero 2015 to 2018 drought was across the media headlines across the world, and floods and cyclones periodically in Mozambique, Malawi, and adjacent regions have come to much of the world's attention. So the aim of this project is to look at the gendered outcomes of climate risk, because what we know about gender and water is that water at a domestic household level is generally a responsibility of women and girls. And so we want to look within communities from an economic, social, and political perspective to address two particular research questions. So what we're calling the notion of hydraulic citizenship and understandings of social activism, how this can link to community resilience and build ways of adapting to environmental change. We'll also be trying to address in this project how can effective environmental behaviour change, so for things like water conservation, how can it be achieved in the very fractured society that is South Africa, with very strong cleavages, not just of gender, but race, class, age, and so on. So those are our objectives. It's meant to be a very much a community embedded project to build sustainable water futures within South Africa to challenge some of these existing inequalities. So we've designed some methods which are still to be finalised with the successful candidate, but we envisage a multi-method approach using interdisciplinary arts and humanities methods. So we're looking at people who are creative, people who perhaps have used things like focus groups, interviews, conventional social science methods, but also storytelling, dance, puppetry, film, drama. We're going to develop that to look at discourses, beliefs, behaviours around social meanings and uses of water. We're also planning that there'll be a placement for the successful candidate who will be expected to undertake several months of fieldwork in South Africa, hopefully within an umbrella organisation like South African Water and Sanitation NGO. Next slide, please. So these are the three supervisors for the project. So I think we're a fantastic team, even if I say so myself. We're a brilliant bunch of creative, dynamic female researchers. And my own expertise that I bring to this project is especially on gender research, and I successfully supervised 5 PhD students to completion as lead supervisor, and all of them did fieldwork overseas in Southern African countries of Malawi, Zimbabwe, South Africa and Lesotho. And I've also worked in a Theatre for Development non-governmental organisation as a social research director. And I'm really delighted to be co-supervising this project with firstly, Dr. Bev Orton, who's a lecturer in criminology and sociology, and she is a very well-known researcher in terms of gender, women's activism, justice in post-apartheid South Africa. And she's got lots of connections with the TV industry in South Africa and uses film, theatre and photography in her research, engaging with women and community groups. And she's great fun to work with, as is Amy. So Amy Skinner is going to be the third supervisor. She's a senior lecturer here in drama and theatre practice, and she's done a lot of research with young people on audience engagement and expertise in community theatre. She's a puppeteer and puppet maker, and also is interested in the production of text in translation on multiple languages. So it's going to be a fantastic creative project, and we're looking forward to receiving lots of wonderful applications and working with a successful candidate on this over the next few years. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Nick Evans, and following on from that exciting project you just heard about, the project that I'll be leading on looks at the centrality of water to the European Atlantic slave trade between the 16th and 19th centuries. Despite being a vehicle for trafficking forcibly people across the Atlantic and similarly across other ocean worlds, particularly in the Indian Ocean world, the water was also a way of quarantining people. And so in an era of COVID, when we hear about disease all the time, we forget about diseases which affected lives of people around the world historically. And so this trans-historical study will try to look at what we can learn from some of the lessons regarding the slavery in the past. So why Hull? Well, one of the reasons, building on what Bryony has already explained, was that the University of Hull has played a pivotal role in researching slave voyages historically. And in 2010, we launched a database about 13 million enslaved Africans who were trafficked across the Atlantic between the 15th and 19th centuries. Particular 40,000 voyages have been carefully documented. And so our research project really looks at mining new evidence, medical data from these the different zones that the transatlantic slave trade operated around, from the Americas and Africa, Latin America and Europe, to see that what can we learn about the reportable or transmissible diseases which were introduced between these different cultures as coercion or coerced slavery was practiced. In particular, some innovative solutions to trying to maintain slavery actually revealed practices about quarantining disease in the historic period. And so we're looking at different quarantine zones, from rivers and coastlines to voyages and vessels to isolation zones in the New World. And similarly as well, when the vessels return to Europe, how are they cleaned and isolated, and what can we learn from these practices? So really what we're trying to look at is how medics, surgeons, ship surgeons especially, try to innovate medical practices in the period of slave trading and in plantation slavery in different places abroad. And what we're trying to do is to examine this voyage data in a new way. So we're trying to cooperate the data that we've got already know exists, and we've been involved in gathering, to actually work with colleagues from the Wilberforce Institute and other disciplines, including history, medicine and medical history, to examine different sources to reveal more information about this fascinating topic. Because learning from the past, we hope that we'll be able to give some practical solutions about how trade can continue during pandemics. Something that we're very aware of is a pressing issue in the 21st century today. Next slide, please. So the expertise particularly draws on my PhD, where I looked at port sanitation and discovered unknowingly that actually medical records can reveal a lot about quarantine during the 19th century. And so the period of the study will go earlier than this, reaching back to the 16th century and then a little bit forward to the 19th century, to highlight how quarantine was a central part of British life. Britain had a separate policy for isolating diseased people because it was an island, and this was unique in world history. And so we're looking at really British involvement in Atlantic slavery and the lessons from it. Complementing my work on medical records will be one of our world authorities at the University of Hull, Professor Trevor Bernard, director of our world-renowned multi-prize winning Wilberforce Institute, and who's a particular expert and supervisor of FRED, so relevant here, on plantation slavery in the Caribbean. And Jamaica was one of the big destinations of the enslaved people who were trafficked illegally from Africa and taken over to the New World. And so in being trafficked across the seas, they were not only transported on vessels that became incubators for disease, but also introduced to the New World diseases that had diabolical effects in both plantation societies in the Caribbean and broader societies with indigenous communities in the Americas. Next slide. The supervisory team doesn't include just us, but instead we've brought together some of the world authorities from Britain, America and Australia to try and support you in developing and personalizing your research that you're very much interested in from this idea that we've got. Professor David Richardson is a world-renowned and multi-award-winning author, but particularly has already written on some aspects of voyage mortality and is willing to help us and guide and shape the research questions and methods you particularly wish to take on board with this project. Suzanne Schwartz, who's worked in different countries, including archives in Sierra Leone and in the Americas, has examined particularly how the voyage role of surgeons in preventing disease. Krista Maglin, now in the University of Melbourne, was previous at the Wellcome Unit at Oxford, and so a pivotal medical historian. And lastly, Stuart Anderson has been a pioneering pharmacologist from the London School of Tropical Medicine and Health, and will bring to this project his breadth of expertise in seeing how pharmacists as well as surgeons pioneered medical solutions to transporting people across the Atlantic. So throughout this project, what we tried to tease out is from an inhumane thing, the business of enslaving Africans, to actually try and find out lessons that could help other people. And so what we're trying to look at is through these 40,000 voyages and the detailed voyages and documentation that we've retained about them, to learn some of the lessons about maritime solutions in the past to diseases which sadly are still prevalent in the world today, from yellow fever, cholera, typhus, smallpox, and of course today COVID, but equal diseases which were really common. So we hope this will really help you and energize you. The key message I think we want to say is we want this to be personalized around you. So clearly the spatial and chronological focus is determined by you. We're just really here to guide you as experts, but following your passion, your vision, what you personally are interested in. And we look forward to welcoming your applications and to discussing these ideas further with you. Thanks for listening.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Anna Pitzer and I'm Senior Lecturer in English in the Department of English, Creative Writing and American Studies. And I'm here to talk to you about a project on Spurn Point, which I'll be supervising alongside Dr. Magnus Johnson, Senior Lecturer in Environmental Marine Science. So the next slide, please. Moving Stories is a project which focuses on Spurn, which, as many of you may know, is a sandy spit between the North Sea and the Humber Estuary. The image on the slide is actually taken from the lighthouse on Spurn, which provides an excellent vantage point from which to appreciate this unique landscape, which for centuries has attracted the notice of writers, historians, scholars, ecologists, ornithologists and conservationists, and that's just to name but a few. And if you will excuse the metaphor, but I am a literary scholar, so it's kind of necessary. I think the image also reminds us of the potential to continue to see Spurn in a new light and from multiple perspectives. So this is a project which has scope to draw on folklore, mythology, poetry and prose responses to Spurn, and also to trace ongoing conversations about its management. Spurn has been and it continues to be a site of conversation, conservation, but also conflict. And this project, I think, can discover some of the unwritten contracts which exist between ostensibly competing individuals, communities, and organisations which all have a stake in Spurn's future. So this is a project which will look at a particular place, but with a view to helping us understand how other estuarine and coastal communities continue to respond to changes to the environment. So to give one example of Spurn's centrality to debate, we can look to ongoing discussions about conservation, preservation and rewilding. So the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust describes Spurn as having an extensive human history traceable in its fascinating but derelict and hidden structures. But Spurn remains, the Trust states, and will always be an utterly wild place. The definition of wilderness as a natural space without any human imprint is an ideal, but it's also for some a fallacy and a matter for negotiation. And in the case of Spurn, relationships between communities of locals, visitors and various experts remains controversial. So this is why we think of Spurn as a palimpsest. And this is really the context of the investigation. It's a palimpsest upon which stories of its exposure to the elements, its exposure to humanity have been written, rewritten, retained in places and partially erased. And this is why we think that an interdisciplinary approach is really important to the objectives of this particular project. So adopting the methodologies of literature and also of marine science, anyone working on this project would be investigating Spurn as central to understandings of the interrelation of coastal ecology, communities and cultures, because in addition to its rich textual history, Spurn has of course a rich ecological history, and we really think that the intersection between those two disciplines is as important as Spurn's location at the intersection of the sea and the river. So the project's focus then is essentially tracing the stories of Spurn and tracing them across existing but also emergent poetic, fictional, social historical and autobiographical responses to this unique and also dynamic situation. So, for example, Spurn has attracted the notice of the poets laureate Andrew Motion and Simon Armitage. Both of them return to Spurn. It's also a site of the remnants of domestic and military activity. So those physical buildings or the ruins of physical buildings also bear the marks of visitors to Spurn, other so-called invaders. And these physical structures, as well as the literary responses to the place, become the building blocks of other stories that are perhaps yet to be told, or stories that can be seen in a new light. The objectives then of the project are to discover how the moving stories of Spurn, which essentially operates as a kind of case study, have then a broader application in shaping how we adapt to coastal erosion and estuarine living elsewhere in the UK and across the globe. And in terms of partnerships, you have the opportunity to work with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and with Dr. James Wood, who is a conservationist and fisheries animateur managing the rewilding efforts on Spurn Point. Have the next slide, please. So my research background is in the writing of the 18th and the 19th centuries, and I have specialist expertise in the recovery of early women writers, familial literary affinities, but also autobiography and biography and memoir. And each of these are quite distinct writing practices. And so I think it's important that we think about oral history, we think about narratives that have been written about Spurn. So not only sort of the more obvious literary responses, but this is a place which has attracted historians who are writing their versions of Spurn. And these are all narratives which are in themselves dynamic and all are aiming in some way to capture the essence of a place which is nevertheless constantly on the move. I'm also currently working on projects centred on water-based recreation and the histories of North Sea communities. So that aspect of the project, which is sort of looking at community history and also engaging with current community responses to the area, are very much part of my own sort of current research interests. You'd also be working with Dr. Magnus Johnson, who is, as I said earlier, a senior lecturer in environmental marine science. Magnus has extensive and eclectic interests from the Antarctic ecosystems to coral reefs and local Yorkshire fisheries. He's worked all over the world and has published articles and books, including, I need to mention, on why shrimps blink and sleepy krill, and he'd be more than willing to share those stories with you, as he has with me several times, I should add. At the moment, importantly, he's working with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust on rewilding the Humber estuary with native oysters and seagrass, but this particular picture shows him diving for shrimps in Japan, just to underline his sort of global credentials. So this is the supervisory team with whom you've been working on moving stories at Spurn.
Right, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Christian Billing. I'm a reader in drama and theatre practice, and I'm also the Director of Research within the School of Arts. My own areas of specialism are in classical theatre and performance culture, in classical Rome and Greece, and also in early modern English and European theatre and performance. The project that is being proposed by my team is Shakespeare's Mediterranean water cultures, and our question centres on how an understanding of the water cultures of ancient and early modern Mediterranean cities and empires affects our ability to read and to interpret Shakespeare's Mediterranean dramas, and in particular the plays that centre around, in antiquity, Rome, Alexandria and the wider Egyptian Empire, and in the early modern period in Venice and in the Ottoman Empire. So this project will seek to define in Shakespeare where the Mediterranean cultures are that are being spoken about. And in terms of defining those cultures, we're going to look at issues in relation to cultural geography, looking at the way in which cultures don't just emerge from a landscape, that the landscape controls them and tells them who they are, but the ways in which humans shape their landscape by intervening with it in order to create a cultural landscape that's more than just the environmental landscape that's created by geography. Looking at those issues, we're going to pit different attitudes that exist within the Mediterranean against each other, and look at the ways in which cultures develop that live with water and accept the ways in which water sometimes cannot be controlled, or also, can we go back to the previous slide because I haven't just quite got onto that one yet, the ways in which cultures also attempt to dominate water and impose them over the top of it. So there are differences in the sites that we see within the plays, and these can be connected to the different peoples that emerge within the areas that are being spoken about. So what are the differences between a city like Venice that exists largely from the need of a group of people to escape danger into an area that's a marshy lagoon, in order to create an isolation for themselves that protects them from attack, or a much wider Ottoman Empire that has different areas, including marshlands, and sometimes uses its political and military might to prevent others having access to water, such as when the Ottomans dammed the Euphrates in order to stop the people of Iraq, who they were attempting to conquer, from being able to use agricultural land in that region. Next slide, please. So what we want you to do in relation to this project is to look under the hood of the Shakespeare plays in order to examine the mental attitudes, the religious attitudes, the political attitudes that lie underneath the areas that are being dramatized by Shakespeare and the cultures that live there. Does a polytheistic Roman tradition treat water differently to a polytheistic Ptolemaic Egyptian religion? Is the culture of Islam and the relationship to water that exists in Arabic cultures on the southern Mediterranean shores different to those of Italy? What we want to do is to look at the ways in which water in Shakespeare speaks not only to power, but to issues of gender, to issues of racial difference and notions of control and suppression. And what that will then do is lead to a critical toolkit that will enable us to consider the ways in which an understanding of the politics of water in the Mediterranean from the ancient period through to the early modern period gives Shakespeare the material, both through his written sources and also in his own imaginary, to demonstrate differences between different cultures and the way that they interact with each other. Next slide, please. So the supervision team is myself. I'm particularly interested in cross and intercultural performance within the Renaissance. I'm interested in cultural dialogue and the ways in which Renaissance drama can represent attitudes that are both common across cultures and which differ. And I'll be supported in this with Dr. Ann Kahiki, who is a scholar of early modern theatre and performance within the Department of English and American Studies. Ann's work focuses a lot on gender, but it also focuses on power and conflict within Shakespeare's plays. So that's Shakespeare's Mediterranean watercultures.
Hello, I'm Barnaby. I'm a senior lecturer in American Arts on the American Studies program in the Department of English, Creative Writing and American Studies. Next slide, please. So the project that I'm leading is called Swirling Dust, River Rising, a comparative analysis of drought and flooding in 1930s American documentary, photography and film. It's quite a long title, but it covers quite a broad area. I'm really interested in the interrelationship of photography and film in this era and how they speak to similar methods of representing real life events as photography and film come of age in this documentary culture of the 1930s. So the concern here is how they represent drought and flooding. So you've got these 4 points axis, which forms the basis of the project. The project is an interdisciplinary comparative analysis of drought and flooding. So what's really interesting is that the mythologies of the 1930s, often the Dust Bowl, but for all that there was a serious problem with drought, there are also a number of devastating floods which have been less commonly attended. So the project will look at how photographers and filmmakers represented these events at the same time, sometimes in the same magazines and books, but also sometimes the same photographers would chronicle both events. A good example is Margaret Bourke-White, the photojournalist. You can see an image there from Life magazine, 1937, Louisville, Kentucky, where she photographed the Ohio River flood, but she also did a series of photographs for Fortune magazine about drought. And it's really about exploring that relationship. To what extent were there different approaches involved in each case? So what's really interesting about this documentary culture is how it reaches a mass audience. So you'll be looking at how these images and films were brought to the American public in newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, books, exhibitions, and film programs. You can see a poster for Perry Lorenz's film, The Plow That Broke the Plains, from 1936 about the Dust Bowl. Lorenz also made a film called The River about flooding the following year. This was produced for the government. And one of the interesting areas of this material is that some of this imagery is produced for commercial publishers and some produced for government, and they have quite different underpinnings. So the aim of the project will be to contrast images of dust and flood in relation to different temporalities. Soil erosion is a slower process, whereas flood is often very immediate. How do these photographers and filmmakers use the camera to represent these particular events? Are there discrete aesthetic strategies involved? Is there a different iconography of flood or dust? What the project will do is to divine the function and significance of documentary at this point in a discourse on water management in the Depression era, looking at a variety of sources, in terms of magazines and also in terms of archives. So there's a great wealth of primary text to examine in this project. Next slide, please. So I am from an art history background. I specialise in art and visual culture in the United States. My publications attend to a wide variety of different aspects of this area, looking at avant-garde culture. I've written a book on the interrelationship of American and Soviet avant-gardes in the 1920s, talking about art, design in lots of different contexts. But I'm particularly interested in the relationship of documentary media and radical culture in the 1930s. My current research is on the racial politics of radical photography, and there are really important questions around race in relation to the material of the PhD project. I'm working on a notorious case of racial injustice called the Scottsboro case from the early 1930s. That's me, thank you.
Thanks very much, Barnaby. Hi everyone, welcome, and thank you ever so much for your interest in our Centre for Water Cultures. I'm Dr. Joe Maltman. I'm here as Deputy Director of the Centre and to speak very briefly about some of the facilities and the research environment that we offer doctoral scholars based at the Centre. So we've heard from 5 fantastic projects today, all of an interdisciplinary nature, but the interdisciplinary benefit of being a doctoral scholar at the Centre doesn't just stop with the supervisors. Alongside the supervisors, you'll have the benefit of access to the research environments, the facilities, and the research cultures of all the disciplines within which you are involved, within which your supervisors are based. Primarily, first and foremost, you'll be based at the Energy and Environment Institute, which has state-of-the-art research facilities and a really warm, welcoming environment for doctoral scholars to work. You'll be part of a dynamic community and also have access and derive benefit from the programme of talks, workshops, and even a reading group that we offer at the Centre for Water Cultures. However, you'll also have access to facilities and to the programmes of research seminars and talks that are offered in your home department or school or research institute, depending on where your supervisors are based. Alongside this, as a doctoral scholar at the Centre for Water Cultures, you will take part in a dedicated doctoral training scheme that we offer. And this will include a placement at one of our many established industry partners, all of which are related to water in some context. Placements will be between 1 to 3 months. We have partners who are involved in water management, water sanitation, but we also have partners who are involved in the heritage, in the creative aspects of water. We hope that our placement scheme not only gives doctoral scholars an insight into industry, but also will benefit their own research perspectives and projects. Finally, as a doctoral scholar in the Centre for Water Cultures, you'll have access to a dedicated mentoring programme. And again, one of the unique benefits is that your mentor will not be part of your supervisory team, but be from out with the supervisory team, but within the centre. And you'll meet your mentor at least 3 times a year, and for benefit of developing your outlook and your professional opportunities. So that's all from me. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hand over to Bryony, who will be leading the Q&A section of today's talk.
Thank you ever so much, Stuart. So let me remind you, if you have questions, to pop them in the questions tab. I can see some that have come through already. So while you have a minute to do that, I'm going to ask Blessing and then Fred to just say hello, who they are, and what they're working on as part of their PhDs. Blessing.
Hi everyone, my name is Blessing. I'm working on the cultural production of flood injustices. So I'm focusing on 3 countries, that is England, here in Hull, and then Netherlands, most likely Arnhem, and Canada. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Fred. The project which I applied for last year when I was in your position was called Water, Drought, Slavery and Unfree Labour in the 19th Century British Empire. And since starting the project in September, I have started to focus specifically on the area which is now the Cooperative Republic of Guyana on the northeast coast of South America. And I'm looking at the ways in which plantation slavery influenced the natural hydrology of the region and was also influenced in turn by that hydrology, and also the ways in which enslaved people adapted to living in such a hydrologic environment.
Brilliant, thank you ever so much. So I can see there are a handful of questions which I or the appropriate member of staff will endeavour to answer. If you've got other questions, pop them in the chat now and we will do our best to get them. First off, somebody's asking how long the funding is for the degree. So it's a PhD, it's 48 months of funding. That includes a period in which we expect you to do your placement. We expect you to research and write up your PhD thesis in that time, so you will need to submit by the 48-month mark, barring maternity leave, family leave, etc., etc. It is 4 years of funding. That is, of course, subject to suitable progression through the PhD programme. So you have a mid-year and annual review progress meeting with your supervisory team and with an external person who checks you're on track, gives you more ideas, helps to develop your project. Somebody is also asking about further possibilities to discuss the projects with supervisors before application. Yes, you're very welcome to email supervisors and ask them specific questions about the project. We don't expect you to send CVs or kind of applications by email. So all of our applications are blind sifted. That means that the supervisors and the team are looking at those without information about names, age, gender, nationality, etc., etc. So you are very, very welcome to find out more about the project, but please bear in mind that those decisions will be made not in the context of those emails, because that's part of our commitment to assessing competencies and to equality, diversity and inclusion. Somebody's just saying nice to be here in the questions. Very nice to have you here. Thank you ever so much. Another question, is there one position available per project? Yes, that's the case. So 5 projects we're advertising. We expect and hope to appoint to all of those. But yes, just one project, one project PhD per application, and you do need to choose which one you are going to apply to. You won't be allowed to apply to more than one. It seems likely that you wouldn't necessarily have the expertise to apply to more than one anyway, because they all come from very different disciplinary backgrounds and represent different interdisciplinary combinations. So pick the one that you are best suited to, that you feel most enthusiastic about, and apply for that one. Somebody asking as well, are external students who are not in the University of Hull welcomed to apply? Absolutely. This is in no way constrained to our own student body. That's why we're doing a webinar. That's why we've invited colleagues to push these opportunities out to potential applicants globally. You are absolutely welcome to apply. Regardless of your background, come with the experience that you need and the enthusiasm you need. As I say, all decision making in terms of invitation for interview is actually made by our teams without information about where you studied for your undergraduate degree or master's, should that be relevant. So absolutely, it's welcome you are welcome to apply across the board. All of our opportunities are open to both home and international students as well. We have a number of international fee waivers that we can apply to support international students. It's highly unlikely that we would take international students to all of the opportunities, but they are open to everyone, and there are fee waivers available to support those projects where the right candidate is an international candidate. Somebody saying, is the interview that comes after application virtual? Yes, we'll do those through Microsoft Teams. Given that we are inviting international applicants, I don't think we're expecting anybody to fly in from South Africa to attend interview. It wouldn't sit well with the energy and environmental commitments either, bearing in mind that some of us have just come back from the UN COP summit. So yes, we will use Microsoft Teams, but you will have opportunities to meet other colleagues, to talk to PGRs, so our existing postgraduate researchers, should you want to try and give you a opportunity to understand more about the centre you are coming to join. Sorry, a long question that I'm reading and it's taking me a second. People asking about disciplinary backgrounds. Each of the PhD adverts outlines the disciplinary background that our supervisors were hoping that candidates come from. They are generally framed quite broadly. So I think the one that Fred applied for last year, if I remember, said something like history, geography, or social science with some expertise in archival materials or something. Does that sound about right, Fred? I can't remember quite what it said, but I remember it being fairly broad. For example, Blessings, I think, said geography, social science, or aligned disciplines. So they're broadly interpreted. So yes, please get in touch. Somebody emailed me earlier asking about an arts background for yours, Barnaby. I was enthusiastic about that. So yes, please. There is a bit more information on each of the in each of the adverts, but please do look. Somebody asking about funding. So yes, it's 48 months of funding. That includes the stipend, so living expenses at the UKRI UK research organisation at their rate, which is set nationally. So we will pay at that. You can look that up. It goes up by inflation every year. I think it was 15,607 from memory this year, but please don't take me on that. Do look it up. But yes, stipend and home fees covered, and the possibility of an international fee waiver as well, if that is relevant, and if you are the best candidate for a position. There's also the opportunity to draw on research expenses as well. So each of our postgraduate researchers have access up to £1,000 per annum to pay towards their research expenses. So I know Fred is drawing on that in order to go to his archives, which are in London. Blessing may use that to support fieldwork in the Netherlands, for example. I think that probably covers it. A couple more questions on disciplinary background, people asking about specific projects and whether their master's or undergraduate is relevant. Again, I'll steer you towards that information. And there was one also right at the beginning. The first person who came in was a question for Elsbeth about whether you would be interested in taking students from Asia to study this. I assume the answer is yes in terms of your international background, but I think you are quite set on the PhD fieldwork being in Southern Africa. Am I right, Elsbeth?
Yes, that's given the expertise of the supervisors, but we could imagine that there could be a student who would have some connections with Asia who could do something cross-cultural, cross-comparative. So we'll look at everybody in terms of what they bring to the project and how it might develop.
Excellent. Thank you ever so much, colleagues. There was one final question about distance learning. So these are physically based PhDs. We would expect you to be physically resident in the vicinity of the University of Hull so that you can take advantage of all of that brilliant support network and culture that Stuart is talking about. However, given that we are in a strange set of circumstances, I feel like I've been saying that for a long time now, but we are very aware that our international students are not necessarily going to have an easy route to the UK. Blessing did marvelous things in reaching the UK through other countries and showed sheer commitment to getting here, but we did technically start you remotely, didn't we, Blessing? You did the first few weeks at home and then have joined us. He is physically here now, though I'm yet to see you in the flesh. I'm beginning to feel that you're kidding me about being in Hull, but we are going to meet later this week or next week, and we're going to assure that he is here. But yes, so there's possibilities of temporary remote learning for our PGRs who need to start off somewhere else because of current COVID circumstances, but in general it is a resident degree. We would expect you to be in the UK, in the building. All of our students have desk space. Fred, I have seen in the flesh, is using his desk in the department, and you have two, don't you? There's a room in history that I've seen you in as well. So yes, I have two offices as well, so I see Fred in both locations. And are you guys located close to each other in EEI? Is there a kind of collaborative space, or you're spread out with other students? Remind me where you are. They're in a different place in the building to me.
There are two Horticulture's desk banks which we have so far, and Blessing and I actually sit next to each other.
There you go. Excellent. But to some extent mixed up with all the other PGRs that are in the Energy and Environment Institute, of whom, Dan, tell me how many we have currently? Lots is the answer, but
yeah, we're at 88 in total.
88 PGRs who are doing all sorts of different things, most of them interdisciplinary in some way, lots of scientists who you can learn about shrimps winking, and I am going to go back to Magnus and ask about that. He may have told you many times, Anna. He has never told me, and now I'm upset about it. Lots of students doing science, but lots of students doing social science, arts people, humanities people, and people involved in a range of projects that align to what's happening in horticultures, that you will be able to tap into relationships with that will help to inform your interdisciplinary project. So I'm just going to pop back to the questions now and check that we have answered everything. I think we have. So in that case, I'm going to thank my colleagues very much for their time this evening. We hope this has been useful to you in hearing about the projects, in learning about the centre, and in making decisions about what project you might like to apply for. If you have further questions, please do email watercultures@hull.ac.uk and we will direct your question as appropriate for an answer. And please feel free to watch the film again, to check out the website, which is hull.ac.uk/watercultures, or to get in touch in any way possible that suits you. So thank you ever so much. Thank you to my colleagues here tonight, and we'll wish you a very good night. Thanks, everyone.